Hi everyone, welcome to my review of Steven Spielberg's E.T. in 1982. Here is the 4K Blu-ray, and we are here with a Spielberg review. Of course, I did say that I'd be doing a kind of review of this around about Christmas time, and yes, watched it tonight for the, I don't know how many times I've seen this from now, a lot, and yes, of course, I have been, reviewing films, since really February properly this year, February 2018, and kind of, it's kind of weird that we've kind of gotten to Spielberg and Kubrick, within a couple of days, and it's December now, so near the end of the year. And yes, I think let's announce it now. What better time to do this? Of course, I will be doing my series, Spielberg, over time, probably over the next 6 months or so. And yes, Steven Spielberg is my second favourite director of all time. It's kind of weird that I've been, as I say, I've started Kubrick and Spielberg within a couple of days and kind of near the end of the year, only just now. And I do think Kubrick is better. I prefer him, but Spielberg is the only one who really comes close at times for me. In terms of quality and quantity, and just how great the highs are. And of course, yes, E.T. Is a film that critically is really praised, and of course amazing at the box office. It done absolutely amazing. It's one of the biggest box office successes of all time, and kind of really the moon. Of course, on the poster, that really is. It's a contender for the most iconic image in cinema. Really, and of course everyone really as well. The score and all this kind of stuff. They recognise E.T. straight away. Hopefully, anyway. It's hard not to. And yes, this film, is kind of a bit less popular with the fans at times. From what I thought it would have been. It's only got 7.9, which is quite shocking for me to see that. This is E.T. we're talking about, and yes, critically though, it's really the second most popular. Spielberg, just behind Schindler's List, really, and of course Jaws. Kind of Saving Private Ryan would be the ones just below that in terms of critics. And yes, this film, of course, one of the most iconic, and it's a film that I've seen many times. It's not my most watched Spielberg. Jurassic Park is, but really, this is a film that I watched a lot as a kid, and it's just a film I remember being I was transfixed. It's magical. It's full of wonder, and what do I think of this film? Is it as good, as kind of some critics say, or whatever kind of thing? Well, for me, and this is a 4K edition, and let me tell you, the 4K is really stunning. It's not, say, 2001: A Space Odyssey, 4K kind of level, but it is wonderful, and it's definitely the best way I've seen the film. And yes, really recommend it. But yes, it's this film, one of the best of all time. How does it kind of, go against the rest of the Spielbergs? Well, for me, it's hands down the greatest Spielberg film. I think the absolute greatest, and there's a couple that are also in my top kind of 30, and some more in my top 50. But this film is actually in my top 10 of all time. It's that good, I think. And actually, the second best, I'm pretty sure, the second best or my second favourite film that I've ever reviewed on my channel. The top being Dance with Wolves, I think as well. 2001: A Space Odyssey is in quality very close to this. But yes, this film is the great Spielberg for me, and really I think actually it's a film I watched a lot as a kid, and it's not quite my most watched, but yes, I think actually as I got older I liked it even more, and I've always loved it. But wow, this film really, this film is cinematic perfection. Of course, Spielberg, I think really he's not made as much great films this century, and certainly not the 2010s, but I have to see all of them still. I've seen about 20 or so, of the 31 or so that he's made, kind of feature films. And yes, I think it's interesting. I think, yeah, he's not made as much great stuff, recently, but I think the 70s. Just look at his career. The 70s, Jaws, Close Encounters, and then you've got this 1-2 punch, of Raiders. I have it here. This heavenly film, Raiders of the Lost Ark, in '81. A mere year after he made E.T. That is something. And then of course he would make Temple of Doom, which I personally love. I don't care. And I think Empire of the Sun is probably one of the top 10 most underrated films of all time, and then you've got The Last Crusade. These are all in the 80s alone. I think he really this is his best decade. He was in, and actually and you can compare it maybe. You can kind of put kind of Hitchcock in the 50s up against this, but for me, of a director who kind of just of a single director who really was at made the kind of highest highs, and you combine the quality and quantity of a single decade. I think Spielberg in the 80s is probably my pick for the best. And yes, I think really he made, of course, masterpieces in the 90s, Schindler's List being one of them. But this guy really is an absolute genius. And this film, of course, he has said, in recent years in interviews that this is probably his most personal film. And of course, it is based off of stuff that happened to him at times. The story is conceived by Spielberg, and he would have, of course, dabbled into the other things in there. And of course, he directed the film, and yes, basically this film, it tells a very, very simple on the surface story, about, of course, an alien known as E.T., of course. You see the opening, and it's one of the best openings in film. It's all visual here, all visual. Of course, there's no dialogue here, and it's just a visual piece, that kind of introduces you to E.T. Without kind of completely revealing him. There's so much mystery there, and of course the government, and the scientists as well later in the film, basically trying to chase this alien down. And of course, yes, it's just stunning. Just the visual mastery here, and just all the different perspectives, and yeah, just the atmosphere, the music when it kicks in. John Williams, of course. I actually think this is the greatest John Williams score of all time. I think it's even better than Empire Strikes Back, this kind of stuff, and Raiders. It's just absolutely stunning, and actually it's probably my top five or six film scores of all time, and definitely my top 10. I think this is one of the very best film scores. It really is a contender for the greatest, and I think once that kicks in as well, it's just perfection. And of course, yes, the simple story of this alien, and really the friendship between this alien and a boy named Elliot, and of course, yes, it's just of course played by Henry Thomas. And actually, the Sixth Sense review I done a while back, I said Haley Joel could be the greatest child performance, but I did actually forget the obvious one. Henry Thomas in this. It's probably the best, actually. I completely forgot what was staring me in the face, and I definitely prefer it. And yes, basically, an absolutely mesmerising performance, absolutely stunning, really is, and so emotional. And it's the friendship. Of course, Elliot wants to kind of stay with this alien. He wants to, and of course, there's going to be a spoilers review. And most people have seen it now, but yes. He basically he wants to kind of keep him safe, and he doesn't want to to kind of him to get caught, and of course he hides it from the mum as well, Mary, and basically it's about their friendship. It's about communication. Of course, Elliot is a character who he's not got that much friends. It's clear, and he wants to be included in everything, but he just can't quite find it. He's quite a lonely child, of course, as well. The parents, just before the kind of the events in this film, it's meant to be that they kind of separated the parents, and they kind of live. It's kind of a family that's kind of dysfunctional. It's not the most stable, and of course, many troubles and stuff. And yeah, basically, the whole course of this film really, once you get to the end, it's kind of about it's so much about family more than anything really, and communication. And really at the end, they're kind of at one, as one again, and it kind of. It's such a comforting ending. They kind of all come together at the end, and kind of the realization, of course, combined with the fact that the family kind of come together, and even the friends, of Mike and everything, they all believe in this, and kind of, it's just absolutely stunning. It really is a powerful film, and it's not just a basic film, a basic story. It is, simple on the surface, but it is just so. Emotional, and the way that it's pulled off cinematically, really combined with the score, and it is just one of the most effective films. It's highly deep. It's not just a basic, family film. No. This is one of the most powerful, and masterfully constructed films of all time. And of course, this film, very very famous scenes, and it's just the whole film is just it's perfect. You've got great scene after great scene. And it's just most of the film is kind of of course Raiders is very very action quite a lot, and well, less so than you'd think, but less so than say Temple of Doom. But there is, of course, loads and loads of action in that. And then this one is a return to something more like Close Encounters. But it's kind of like if Close Encounters, the aliens at the end, one of them came to Earth really, which is really interesting. And it's more of a drama, more of a kind of interaction film about communication. And just it's so human the way it explores humanity, and of course other life as well. It's just stunning, and of course, it has got these famous scenes, but the whole film is perfect. I think that's the perfect setup act. The first 40 minutes or so, you've got the mystery, you've got E.T. Getting discovered. No one really believing it at first, apart from Elliot, and of course, yeah, basically, as the film goes on, the characters grow. The warmth heightens even more, and of course you've got many many dramatic moments after the hour mark, and you've got the final operatic mesmerizing bike chase, and leading to the last scene, the last 10 minutes, which is just really for me the greatest first of all John Williams piece of music, and just probably the greatest Spielberg sequence of all time for me. It's just absolutely stunning. This film actually, for me, the bike chase, near the end of the film and all that combined, it's better than the Raiders, kind of action scene for me. Although it's not really an action scene in this one as much. I wouldn't say if you can consider it really an action scene, but it is better for me than the Raiders chase. And of course, very very different, but it's got similarities there. And it's kind of. It's just absolutely stunning. It's epic. This film is so human. The way that kind of communication is explored, and just the warmth of this film. I think Spielberg is a director who really consistently, especially the 20th century, for me, is probably the warmest director of all time. Kubrick is pretty close, but really consistently, in this manner, in family films, I think Spielberg is really the definition of that, and Spielberg really has changed my life, and this film is right at the top of that. I think this is definitely his greatest film. I think what it says, about family, kind of just as well childhood. It explores childhood so well. Of course, you see very very nostalgic scenes in the school, and kind of around the neighbourhood as well. I think it's a lovely neighbourhood. I just feel very nostalgic when watching this, and it's just beautiful, this film. And of course the actual exploration of childhood for me is the greatest I've seen in film. It's just wonderful. It's magic, really is, this film. And I think just everything in this film, from start to finish, is so well directed. It really is something to behold. And of course Spielberg wanted this film to be shot roughly in chronological order, to kind of give the child actors, more of a feel, more of an understanding of the kind of progression of emotion and stuff as well. He didn't want to kind of make it, confusing, and because the main cast of the film, are kids, I think that was perfect. Kind of to allow them to kind of understand it more emotionally, and kind of the progression of it. And yes, it just the end result is really some of the most the greatest performances really, across the board. Absolutely stunning. Dee Wallace as well, as Mary, the mother, is just absolutely brilliant in this film, and just this family unit that Spielberg, of course, would explore in a lot of his films, even his modern ones as well. I think really is at its peak here. It's so warm, and just beautiful, beautiful film, lovely film, and I think it's so uplifting. It's so powerful. Relatable, and it really just the way it progresses. It's definitely the best narrative in a Spielberg film as well, and it's just absolutely stunning. It's a blockbuster that really it's probably the most. It's a contender for the most human, really, along with a couple of other ones. Top 5 most human blockbusters, really, of all time. It is, of course, it's got special effects and everything in it, and it's brilliant spectacle, moments. But it's such a human film. Not for a moment is this style or anything over substance. And these moments that do happen, when they're littered throughout the film. Of course, the famous first bike ride with Elliot and ET. The moon. That is absolutely. It's one of the most epic and beautiful and uplifting moments in cinema. It literally uplifts you. And it's a moment really that really defines cinema. More than most. And of course, I actually prefer as well the second kind of ride when it's the sunset. And yes, all the rest of the group come together and they're all riding as well. That moment is just gives me shivers every time. I can watch that scene on loop and kind of be overwhelmed, constantly every time. And speaking of overwhelmed, this film makes me cry every time. It's so emotional. It's so just from how uplifting it is, but also it's got its heartbreaking moments. Of course, when E.T. you think he's dead, Elliot, he's crying and all this kind of stuff. The whole group, the whole family are upset. But then of course you've got hope, and then of course in Spielberg fashion, mostly anyway. He gives an ending where it is, this one's a bittersweet, but really I can't really feel anything other than just joy and just fulfillment. I think it's sad to see E.T. go, but there is kind of wonder. There was hope. Sorry, that kind of a chance that he may have come back at some point. Kind of thing to Earth and seen Elliot. But yes, it is. It's an ending. Yes, it's sad in that sense. But it's so fulfilling. It's so satisfying and it's so wonderful. That really it ticks every single box and more. There's boxes. That are, I don't know where they are until I see this film. This film is really just, this is how you do a sci-fi film. And of course, it is for me, one of the 10 greatest films ever made. And actually, it's also my 10 favourite films. I think this and 2001: A Space Odyssey, actually another film as well, are really the best sci-fi films. If you're talking about full-on sci-fi, there's another one that I do prefer, I think, to all of these. But calling it sci-fi, I don't always call it this, but yes, there's a clue. But this film, really, it's absolutely mind-blowing. The performances, the wonderful script. There's so many sequences that are just genius. The juxtaposition of kind of classic film as well that's shown, and the scene where E.T. and Elliot are kind of connecting, and there's things happen to E.T. And then of course Elliot experiences the feeling, and it's just, this film is hilarious. That's another thing. Spielberg uses the comedy, it's kind of to ground this film, actually, and he's got these moments where it's just something to behold. It's kind of overwhelming with kind of spectacle and sci-fi and fantasy, but then you've got the comedy which kind of grounds the film and actually makes it more believable even. And of course, even the bike ride, the first one, it ends with a kind of a fall to the ground, the bike, just to kind of it keeps it at bay kind of thing, and it keeps it even more human, kind of grounded, and the comedy, at its best can do this in cinema. In this film as well, it's full of comedy through the characters, Mike, Gertie, and just of course Elliot and E.T. It's just, there's so many funny moments, and Mike's friends as well, the kind of the bickering that goes on there, the banter, it's just really, really, it's hilarious, and it's really, really warm as well and sincere. And just the way, as I say, that childhood is captured in this film could not have been better. And it's just, this film really has rarely been topped. I think it is, as I say, top 10 film of all time. It's some of the best cinematography I've ever seen. The lighting, the use of zooms, perfectly judged for me in this film. And of course, just the way that the kind of the action scene, if you call it that, is shot towards the end, and just the spectacle of this, the use of blue, the colour blue, and all the different elements that Spielberg uses in the cinematography, and of course the editing. It's a top 15 for me in terms of cinematography, and that is really a hard category to kind of get into the top 10, or even let alone top 25. But for me, this is definitely in the top 15. I think, I think actually it's the best Spielberg cinematography. It's the best direction by far. This film has the perfect structure. It's got the fulfillingness as well that happens at the end, and it's just a magical film that really, it defines warmth, it defines heart in cinema. And if you're talking about spiritual films, it literally is one of the maybe 10 greatest cases of that in cinema as well. I think the way that Spielberg literally elevates, just how symbolic this film is at times as well, and how it explores the themes of family, as well. It goes into childhood a lot, and just in a way isolation, and then of course the way that the family and even the friends come together as well. Of course, the government scientists are kind of the villains in a way, but I think it's more about that is incorporated there, but I think it's more about just how kind of the positives focused on family and kind of just communication in general, and of course along the way he gets to make kind of sci-fi film as well, kind of thing. It's not just a sci-fi and it's not just a family film. This is such a perfect blend of different elements and kind of drama and sci-fi, kind of comedy and adventure. I think it's one of the moments when they're riding the bike, exploring, and of course the chase scenes, and just this whole film. It's just a wonderful adventure feel. There's so many ones. Jurassic Park. It's just Empire of the Sun. That really he is the master of that for me. Adventure films, and in this one, yes, it kind of takes place in just a few locations, but it is still an adventure film at times. All these genres, all these elements, all these themes. There's not loads of themes, but he focuses so purely on the ones that he does, that they're so well executed that it's really the most effective Spielberg film. And just its visual mastery in the score as well. Of course, John Williams, my favourite composer of all time, even better, edging out Ennio Morricone. I announce that now. I always say they're my two favourites, but for me, John Williams is the best overall, and I think this is the best score. And yeah, runner-up would be Empire Strikes Back. I would say for John Williams, and yes, just so many great ones. But E.T. is the best for me, and this film, it's so operatic, and it's such a magnum opus that of course, it's in my top 10 of all time, and I thought, of course, it's a great way to kind of start a Spielberg marathon series, and with my favourite one. And yes, E.T. of course it gets full marks from me. So of course recently, I've done quite a few, maybe more than kind of past months. Reviewed a lot of magnum opuses, and for me this is just one of the easy ones to give it 100% plus, tier S, my highest rating, reserved for the greatest films ever made. The ones that I connect to, kind of a cut above even, some of the best, films of all time. But these ones are kind of a bonus tier, as I say, kind of top 50, a bit over the top 50 at the moment have got, this rating, and I think it used to be a bit less, but I kind of extended it a bit. But yeah, even if I had another rating system that was, reserved for just maybe not even 10 films, this would get the rating as well. I probably won't ever do that, but yes, this film, it exceeds kind of anything, almost anything I've seen, and anything. I think the 80s was such a great decade. It was just so charming. There's so many masterpieces, kind of filmmakers making great films. Of course, the Last Leone films as well. Once Upon a Time in America. Of course, you've got The Shining as well by Kubrick. So many great films, including of course Spielberg, and you've got Empire Strikes Back. It's just a ton of masterpieces. But this one for me, and even better than Empire Strikes Back for me, this is the greatest film of the 80s, and the best decade for Spielberg, and the best decade for any director singularly, I think. And this film is in my top 10 of all time. It's a magnum opus. It's, for me, better than Schindler's List. I stand by that. I think this actually makes me more emotional and more kind of moved and affected than Schindler's List. And that is saying a lot. I cry with that every time. But for me, this is the one that I connect to above even, his greatest films. I think this film is the most emotional, purest Spielberg film, and kind of most human, most magical. It really defines adventure, sci-fi, kind of a film about family, and what, kind of the meaning of life and kind of communication. Really, it's only in terms of films that kind of really dabble into communication, explore it in this way. I think only Dance with Wolves, really beats this, and that is saying something. I think this film is an absolute magnum opus. It's in my top 10. It's probably never going to leave that, and I think it's better than anything Spielberg made. And he's made a lot of masterpieces for me. But this is his greatest film, and of course, I'd highly recommend the 4K. But this film is just pure. It really is. It kind of takes elements from silent films, and of course, it kind of goes even further on what kind of Spielberg had achieved with his blockbusters. Jaws, Close Encounters, Raiders, and kind of just goes even higher to elevate and kind of blow my mind, literally. And yeah, I think the characters are some of the greatest in cinema. The friendship between E.T. and Elliot, and just the warmth of the overall the family and the friends, the whole town where it's portrayed. This is cinema, and this is Spielberg's best film, and it's E.T. And thanks for watching my review.